The hits just keep on coming for Kyle Larson. You know, just 5-6 years ago, many believed he could be the next Jeff Gordon. Now he is in the deepest hole he has ever found himself in his entire racing career. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. This past Sunday night during an iRacing event, NASCAR driver Kyle Larson was caught on a hot mic using a racial slur in what it appears he believed was a private chat between him and I guess a buddy of his or something, but actually ended up being broadcast over the entire driver's live chat and was caught on certain drivers' live streams on Twitch. And as pretty much everyone expected, the fallout from this mistake, from this incident, has been quite massive. So I did my video yesterday after Kyle Larson was suspended, but first by Chip Ganassi Racing, the team he drives for in the Cup Series, but then he was suspended by NASCAR itself for an indefinite period of time. NASCAR was mandating that he would have to attend a sensitivity training before he would be considered for reinstatement. As sponsors began to sever their ties with Kyle Larson released a video apology, which I played in yesterday's video.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm sorry. Last night I made a mistake and said the word that should never ever be said, and there's no excuse for that. I wasn't raised that way.
That's just a snippet right there. In yesterday's video, I played the entirety of his apology. I also played the entire clip where the actual word was used. So if you missed that, or if you just want to go look up, if you haven't heard the tape by now, if you're interested, it's out there. I'm just not going to broadcast it uncensored on my channel. I don't want that here. It became pretty clear as of yesterday that Kyle Larson's immediate NASCAR future was very much in question, in jeopardy. And today, things have been taken a step further even. Not too surprising, but this morning, Chip Ganassi Racing announced that they had ended their relationship with Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson's free agency period has begun a few months earlier than I think he wanted, but now Kyle Larson is without a NASCAR ride in any of their major series. So I'm going to give you guys my reaction to this whole news. We're going to talk about it just a little bit more. This is not going to be as long or as in-depth of an episode as yesterday's was. I covered most of my bases in yesterday's video, but I just want to react to this newer news, the escalation of things, if you will, and I just want to give you guys my thoughts of what Kyle Larson does now, what I think he should be doing now, and what I think will happen to Kyle Larson in the future and what his future holds. Because a lot of fans are jumping on the his career is over bandwagon, and I think that is incorrect, and I don't think that is fair or necessarily true. Kyle Larson still has a racing career ahead of him, without a doubt. And he very well should. I said this in yesterday's video. He 100% deserves many of the punishments, much of the fallout he's gotten. I definitely believe that is 100% fair and warranted, but I said it yesterday and I'll say it again today. I don't believe Kyle Larson deserves to have his career automatically terminated because of this mistake. The point of a mistake and an apology is that supposedly you're supposed to be able to learn from your mistakes and grow and improve yourself as a human being. And I think if Kyle Larson is able to clearly demonstrate that he has improved, that he has a greater understanding, that he knows the extent of his actions and the harm his actions are capable of, once he fully understands the scale and the scope of what he has done here, why what he said was wrong, and can reconcile with the fan base, can reconcile with everyone around him, I definitely believe Kyle Larson deserves a second chance in racing and in NASCAR, and I full on believe that as long as he continues to handle this situation maturely, which so far I think he has to this point, it's only been a day and a half, but if he continues this, he will once again be back in NASCAR at some point in the not super distant future. I believe that, and I think that's what's most likely. So going back to the beginning, Kyle Larson being let go by Chip Ganassi Racing, Chip Ganassi himself really had no choice. The sponsors forced his hand. As was documented in yesterday's episode, McDonald's had severed their ties. They'd ended their sponsorship with Kyle Larson. Credit One Bank had ended their sponsorship of Kyle Larson. Even Chevrolet terminated their relationship with Kyle Larson. In other words, all three of those major brands stated that they would not sponsor a race car that Kyle Larson was driving. So Chip Ganassi had no choice. It is worth mentioning, and it wasn't clear at the time I made my video yesterday, but McDonald's, Credit One, all those sponsors I just named, they're perfectly fine, at least from the sounds of it, of staying with Chip Ganassi Racing, assuming they get another driver in that 42 car. They will just not sponsor a Kyle Larson-driven race car. So it's not like Ganassi lost sponsors entirely, but I'm sure their relationship is a bit tenuous at the moment. And it's not surprising at all that major sponsors would back out as quickly as they did. McDonald's, Credit One Bank, for example, do not only market in NASCAR, they market nationwide, worldwide. They can't afford the risk of supporting someone who has done something this controversial, especially in recent memory. They don't just advertise to and do business with NASCAR fans, they do business with all sorts of people across the country, across the world that have different beliefs. iRacing, Clover, a lot of those brands ditched Kyle Larson yesterday because those are nationwide, or in some cases, worldwide brands. It's the big sponsors that have all sorts of people to answer to, they're the ones that I don't blame them for ditching Kyle Larson. It's just the nature of the world today. But that's all I'm saying is Chip Ganassi had absolutely no choice. Now the question is, who can he get to replace Larson in the 42 car? Obviously, we're still at least a month away from seeing real race cars on the real racetrack again, so he's perhaps got some time. I mentioned yesterday, and pretty much everyone's mentioning Ross Chastain as the obvious choice, but that's still a little up in the air with Ross Chastain subbing for Ryan Newman over at Roush Fenway Racing. We don't know exactly when Ryan Newman's going to be able to return, so that's very much up in the air. Nobody really knows how their contracts work. There's a good chance Chip Ganassi's just allowed to take Chastain from Roush whenever they want, so this may be a non-concern, but then Roush has a seat they may have to fill. Silly season's got really wild now, let me put it that way. But speaking of the future, that's what I want to focus this episode on. What does Kyle Larson's future hold? Because right here, right now, it certainly feels like his career may be over. At least his NASCAR career, or his Cup Series career, might look like it's in serious jeopardy right now. I don't believe that's the case. See, if we look back in recent history at some drivers who've been suspended for on or off the track missteps, they've all, for the most part, gotten second chances. One of the obvious ones we all look at is Kurt Busch, who has had several run-ins with the NASCAR sanctioning body over his career. In the mid-2000s, Kurt Busch had an issue in Arizona. That was a whole deal and ultimately partially contributed to his depart from Roush Racing. In 2011, I believe it was, he verbally abused a reporter. I think then in 2012, he was suspended for threatening a reporter. And then again in 2015, he was suspended for a little bit of time when a domestic violence lawsuit was brought forth against him. That lawsuit eventually ended up being thrown out, so he was reinstated. Didn't miss too much time that year, but my point stands is that Kurt Busch has had many issues during his up and down NASCAR career. And he's had his highs. He was a champion in 2004. He ran with Team Penske, but he lost that ride as a result of a lot of these issues. And he's had his lows, which like running for Phoenix Racing and just a backmarker car for much of 2012. He was also with Furniture Row Racing before Furniture Row Racing was really a contender. So he's had his highs, he's had his lows, and had to work his way back up into decent equipment like he's in today. Another recent example is Tony Stewart. I mean, Tony Stewart killed someone in a dirt race. He was found not guilty, but he still had to settle with the family of the driver who was killed. He missed a few races for that, but he's come back, raced a couple more years, is now a team owner in NASCAR, a championship team owner, and he just got inducted into the Hall of Fame. And then yesterday, I cited a more pertinent example. Jeremy Clements in 2013 was suspended by NASCAR for a couple weeks after he also used the same racial slur in an off-air interview. He had to attend sensitivity training, only missed a couple weeks, but he then came back into NASCAR, and he still raced many Xfinity races for years. He even got a win a few years back. So I'm citing these past examples just to note that while this right now is a very, very tough time and a very down period in Kyle Larson's career, I don't believe this spells the end of his racing career. I think he'll be back one day. Now, with the way 2020 has gone, with him losing his ride, losing all these sponsors, and the way the whole schedule, we don't know how many races are going to be on, we don't know what the schedule is going to look like, and what's going to happen from here on out. He's not going to race in the Cup Series again in 2020. Mark my words on that one. I think that's extremely unlikely. But I will not be shocked if we see Kyle Larson in a NASCAR Cup car in 2021. I mean, he was already supposed to be a free agent at the end of the season. There's a good chance he was already in some conversations with certain teams before this issue came up. There's the phrase, time heals all wounds. I think time is going to be a factor here, but I also do think Kyle Larson needs to take initiative here in trying to repair his image. He took a good step yesterday by filming his apology, showing what I believe to be real remorse, but he needs to continue to push that kind of message forward, and he needs to continue to take things steps further. He needs to really convey that he has an understanding of why the word he chose to use is offensive to many. I think he needs to display an understanding of the historical context behind it. I just think he needs to publicly display a full and true understanding of why what he did is wrong. And I think at that point people will begin to move on. And I think sponsors, as time will pass, he will be able to once again get sponsors on board. I mean, Kurt Busch is still able to get sponsors to this day. I just read off his list. Tony Stewart still gets sponsors to this day. I read his list off. I understand Kyle Larson's incident here, that in 2020 this type of incident gets more press perhaps than some of those other types of incidents. That is true, but I don't believe that spells the end for Kyle Larson's career. I do think he will be back at some point sooner rather than later. Many people saw him going to the 14 car in 2021 before this incident. I mean, Kyle Larson before this was arguably the hottest free agent set to hit the market at the end of this year. Many people had him going over to Stewart-Haas Racing because he's a dirt guy, Tony Stewart's a dirt guy. Good chance Clint Bowyer's going to retire at the end of this year and go into a TV role. That's not set in stone, but that seems kind of where that's headed. A lot of people thought Kyle Larson was a perfect candidate for Stewart-Haas Racing. I don't know if it's going to happen as early as 2021. Larson might have to to start a little lower than that next year, but I will not be shocked if at some point here down the line Kyle Larson ends up in a Stewart-Haas racing car. I think that's very likely. Tony Stewart, like I said a minute ago, he's had issues like this. He's had to repair his image with the public before. I mentioned Kurt Busch, how after a lot of his incidents, he had to spend a couple years racing for kind of not so great teams, working his way back up. Tony Stewart was the first mainstream, big team owner to take a chance on Kurt Busch and give him a top cup ride again. Ultimately, it's going to come down to, can Kyle Larson attract some sponsorship? And I think if he does everything I just said, if time continues to pass, if he continues to handle this maturely, if he can illustrate that he has grown from this, I think in time, sponsors, at least some sponsors, will return to Kyle Larson. Enough sponsorship that I think he can afford a Cup Series ride, and that some team owner out there, and I think Tony Stewart is still the most likely one, will be willing to take a chance on him and put him in one of their race cars. But it's not going to happen overnight. I don't think it's super likely it happens in 2021, to be quite honest. I think, I don't know if that's going to be enough time. I don't know if there's going to be enough that changes during that period of time to make something like that happen, because these are negotiations that are going to have to start happening pretty soon, and I just don't think he's going to be able to repair his image in that short of amount of time. So I don't know about 2021, but for people saying that Kyle Larson's career is over, that he's done, he's never going to race in NASCAR again, I don't believe that. But let me know what you think down below. I think any chance of Larson going to Hendrick Motorsports next year has pretty much been eradicated at this point. I don't think Ally would be thrilled at this point. I don't think they have Larson on their list anymore, but let me know what you think. Where do you think Kyle Larson could end up if he comes back into the Cup Series again one day soon? But let me know what you guys think. Anyway, that's all I've got for this episode. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, and a big thank you, of course, to my Patreon supporters. Could not do this show without the support I get from each and every single one of you over there on Patreon. So if you also want to support the channel, support this show, check out that top link down in the description, y'all. I greatly appreciate it. Definitely a crazy couple days here in the NASCAR world. Who thought at the beginning of this year that we would be reading a headline stating Kyle Larson fired from Chip Ganassi Racing? I mean, nobody sees this stuff coming. But like I said yesterday, when you're in a position of influence and power like Kyle Larson is, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. He has a lot of responsibility to a lot of different people who are spending a lot of money to support him. And when you have that type of responsibility and you make a mistake like this, it's only become more amplified. So I think the punishment is what I expected, but I don't think this should end his career, and I don't think it will. I think Kyle Larson will be back in NASCAR at some point. It just probably won't be in 2020. But thank you all for watching. Subscribe if you're new. That's all I've got. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Take care of yourself out there, everyone.